Before we talk about all the juicy stuff, let's talk about some of Tao's animations canceling during her charge attack. This is not a required thing to do, but it will save you some time, especially if you don't have her at C1. After you hold your left click to begin the charge attack animation, you either press space to jump, or you just use your right click to blink. I suggest using the jump because it will not consume stamina. Another thing that you can do is to change the camera direction after finishing a charge attack, as I do in this clip. This method won't work all the time, but in this case, it works well enough. Now some of you may be asking, why would I want to do the animation canceling for her charge attacks? It is because you will want to maximize the number of charge attacks that you can do during her Paramila Papilio state. This state lasts 8 seconds and you will mostly want to do as many charge attacks as possible while her state is active. Before we jump into the good stuff, let's talk about her constellations. The first one, it's self-explanatory. When Tao uses her elemental skill, her charge attack does not consume stamina. This is a good constellation because you are not restricted by your stamina bar. Let me give you a quick example. At C0 you will need to watch your stamina bar before entering the Paramila Papilio state in order to get the maximum number of charge attacks possible. This is without considering the probability of dodging or evading enemies. If you add those into the mix, you will have even less stamina to do your charge attacks. But at C1 you can spam those charge attacks for the whole duration of the Paramila Papilio state without losing any stamina. Her second constellation increases the damage of her Blood Blossom by an amount equal to 10% of her max HP. The higher your max HP will be, the more damage the Blood Blossom will do, especially if you have a 5-star weapon like Staff of Homa. Additionally, her Elemental Burst will also apply the Blood Blossom on her targets. Before moving to the next constellations, I want to point out one thing. If you are a low spender, her C2 is good enough, you do not need to go any further. Because these two constellations really work great together. Her C1 will enable you to not worry about your stamina usage during your charge attacks, and her C2 will give her a major damage boost to her Blood Blossom. Her third and fifth constellation will increase your elemental skill and elemental burst by 3. Her fourth constellation will increase all your party members' crit rate by 12% for 15 seconds, excluding herself. This will only activate after you defeat an enemy affected by the Blood Blossom. This constellation works really well with her second one and her first Ascension talent, which increases all the party members' crit rate by 12% for 8 seconds when Paramita Papilio state ends. Sixth constellation. This one will only trigger if Tao is below 25% HP, and it has 2 additional effects. The first one is, if she is below 25% and she suffers a lethal blow, she will not die, she will remain alive with 1 HP. This one has a 60 seconds cooldown, so keep that in mind. The second effect is, when she is below 25% HP, her crit rate is increased by 100% for the next 10 seconds. This constellation is kinda broken because you can trigger the 25% HP threshold by yourself by using your elemental skill. Plus you can build her a bit differently because of the 100% crit rate that she will receive during those 10 seconds. For the talent section, it is a bit tricky because mostly depends on what is your current build or playstyle. If your build is focused on her normal and charged attacks, you should prioritize leveling up first her elemental skill, then normal attack talents. If your build is focused more on doing big pippy damage, you will want to prioritize first her elemental burst talent. What I recommend you to do is to level up all of her talents to level 6 and then prioritize your build based on your playstyle. First, let's get the big boys out of the way. The best weapon for her, it's the Staff of Homa. There is no contender here. This weapon was made for her. The second best 5-star is the Jade Spear. This one is a good replacement if you do not have the Staff of Homa. Another good thing about this weapon is that the secondary stat gives you crit rate. The weapon passive is also good if you can get the maximum number of stacks. The last two 5-star weapons are the Vortex Vanquisher and the Skyward Spine. First, let's talk about the Skyward Spine. This is a good weapon for her if you do not have the Staff of Homa or the Jade Spear. The weapon passive is nice because it increases your crit rate by 8% and your normal attack speed by 12%. Also, your normal and charge attacks have 50% to trigger a vacuum blade that deals damage in a small area. But the only small problem I see with this weapon is that the weapon substat gives you energy recharge. Now for the Vortex Vanquisher. This weapon is not a great choice for her because in order to receive the full benefit from this weapon passive, you need to be protected by a shield. Additionally, the weapon substat gives you attack percent, which is not bad, but not so great for her. Now for the 4-star weapons that are good for her. Let's start from the bottom. First we have the craftable weapons like Crescent Pike, Prototype Star Glitter, and Dragonspine Spear. The Crescent Pike is the worst weapon for her because it gives you physical damage. The same things apply to the Dragonspine Spear. The Star Glitter is okay, I guess, if you don't have any other weapon. The weapon passive synergizes well with her playstyle, but the secondary stat is not so good. Next, we are gonna talk about the 2 weapons series that you can buy from the in-game shop. First we have the Royal Spear. This one gives you attack percent, and the weapon passive gives you an 8% crit rate, which can be stacked 5 times, which is nice, but if you hit a critical hit all those stacks will be removed. Due to Hu Tao fast attack speed animation, you can accumulate stacks for the weapon passive faster. The second weapon from the in-game shop is the Blackcliff Pole. It's a good weapon overall. It gives you crit damage as a secondary stat, but the weapon passive it's kinda situational. If you fight multiple enemies, you can utilize the weapon passive, but if you fight a single enemy, that passive it's useless. Next, we have all the other 4-star weapons that you can only get from the gacha. We have 3 weapons in this section: the Lithic Spear, Favonius Lance, and the Dragon's Banes. First, the Lithic Spear. This weapon is good for her as a 4-star because it gives you attack percent from the secondary stat, which is okay. However, the passive for this weapon is good, especially if you can stack it to the max, which is easy, even if you are an F2P player. This weapon has one of the most easily accessible passive. We get a 12% crit rate and 28% attack at maxed stacks. The Favonius Lance. This one is not meant to be used by her as a DPS because it gives us energy recharge in both secondary and weapon passive, which is nice if you want to use her elemental burst more often. The last one is the Dragon's Bane. This one is one of the best 4-star weapons for her if you want to do big pippy damage with elemental reactions, especially if you use Hu Tao into a vaporize comp. There is one more 4-star weapon to talk about, and that is Deathmatch. This weapon is obtainable by purchasing the Battle Pass. This one is one of the best 4-star weapons for her because the secondary stat gives you crit rate and the weapon passive gives us attack percent based on how many enemies we have nearby. There is one more weapon that I want to talk about before we are done with the weapon section, which is the 3-star weapon White Tassel. This weapon can only be looted from chests if you didn't use the weapon as a level up material for your other weapons. This one will be a good option for those that don't have a good 4-star weapon for Hu Tao, plus you can refine it to refinement rank 5 easily. All the weapons that I talked about are at refinement rank 1. If you have a higher refinement for your weapons like Dragon's Bane or White Tassel, their performance will be higher than some of the other weapons. One of the best 4-star weapon for her at refinement rank 5 is the Dragon's Bane, which mostly can compete with the other 5-star weapons at a lower refinement rank. So in conclusion for the weapon tier list, the best 5-star weapon for her is Staff of Homa. The best 4-star weapons for her will be Dragon's Bane, Death March, and White Tassel, but only at refinement rank 5. Hu Tao is a very flexible character because she has multiple builds that you can access and still do a lot of damage. First, let's talk about the ones that are situational. Retracing Balai 4-piece set. The 4-piece bonus is good for her if you plan to build her towards her normal and charge attacks. The only problem with this set is the 2-piece bonus and the requirement of having a character that can shield you. The next one we have is the Lava Walker. This set is similar to the Thundersoother set that you build on catching. This one is an okay choice in Hu Tao case because even if you encounter enemies that are immune to pyro damage, you will switch her out because her normal attacks without being in the Paramila Papilio state won't do any damage because this unit is more focused on dealing pyro damage reactions instead of physical damage. Next, we have Crimson Witch of Flames, which is the best set for her. There are multiple variations for this build. You can go with 4-piece, which most of the time you will use in Vaporize and Melt comps. Now for some 2-piece variations for this set. You can pair it with 2-piece Gladiator for the 18% attack bonus. Or you can go with 2-piece Crimson Witch plus 2-piece Wander's Troops for more elemental mastery, which increases your melt and vaporize damage. This set is mostly used as a substitute until you get 4 pieces of Crimson Witch of Flames. For the last variation, you can go with 2-piece Crimson Witch of Flames and 2-piece Noblesse Oblige for 20% more elemental burst damage. These are all the builds that are going to be viable for her. Now you are wondering, there are too many variations of them. Which one should you go for? If you don't have all these sets available, what I recommend you is to go with 4-piece Crimson Witch of Flames. This one will be the best overall of all the listed sets because it will increase your reactions damage.
That's quite big.
And gives you an additional 7.5% pyro damage bonus when you use your elemental skill. The crown artifact slot that you want to go for is either crit rate or crit damage. This will depend on what your weapon secondary stat is in order to achieve that 1.2 ratio. If you have crit damage on your weapon, you would want to go with crit rate for crown. One more small thing here, if you have her at C6, which increases her crit rate by 100%, you will want to go for more crit damage on your artifacts. The main stats that you are looking for are crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, and HP percent. If you have already good substats, you may want to consider some elemental mastery and energy recharge. One last thing I want to mention in this section is that you want your sand artifact slot to be HP percent because of the Paramita Papilio effect, which increases her attack based on her max HP, which is why you want your sand slot to be HP percent. There is another important thing about her Paramila Papilio description, which says that the attack bonus gained by her max HP cannot exceed the 400% of Hu Tao's base attack. Which is why there is a cap on how much bonus attack you will get by having HP percent. That's why you don't go for a full HP build, because you will exceed that threshold. In the video description, I will link you 2 documents that are made by the Reddit community, which will explain how much HP percent you need for each individual weapon in order to not exceed the 400% threshold. Now for some characters that work well with Hu Tao. First, we have Xingqiu and Diona. In my opinion, these two are the best 4-star characters that you can pair with Hu Tao. You can use Hu Tao with either of them in Melt or Vaporize comps, and you will do big pippy damage. Other cryo characters which works with her are Kea and Ganyu by using their elemental burst. Chandyun won't work well with her because her elemental skill pyro damage cannot be overridden. Another good character is Mona because her elemental burst applies an omen which increases the damage that the enemy will receive by a certain percent. But since she is a 5-star, not many will have her. Another 4-star character for her is Fischl, but only if you have her at C6. You can use Hu Tao in C6 Fischl to do a lot of overload damage constantly for the whole duration of Hu Tao's elemental skill. I won't recommend using this comp on normal enemies because you will send all of them flying. This comp works mainly on bosses. One party scenario will be Hu Tao and Zhongli for the shield and for the 20% elemental resistance decrease that the shield gives you, then Xinqiu for the vaporized damage, and for the last unit, go with what you want. You can choose another pyro for the 25% attack increase from the pyro resonance. She is very squishy early on, when you don't have a lot of HP on her. She is very flexible, she can be builded in multiple ways. Her best weapon by far is the Staff of Homa. This weapon was made for her. She's good at C0, you can still do the animation canceling to get more charge attacks, but her first and second constellations are a big power spike. If you don't want to go for her C6, I recommend stopping at C2. Sometimes even if you have over 70% crit rate, she will not crit with her elemental burst. I don't know if this is a bug on her or it's just me being unlucky.